tram. Same as always, no real plan or nothing planned for tonight. Just whatever questions you guys have got, I will give them a shot answering them. Trying to think if there's anything exciting going on at the shop. And hello to the Poconos. Hey, Steve. The 3FE swapped FJ40 is getting really close to starting. I'm waiting on a few pieces to finish up the intake ducting and then hopefully be able to fire it up. So that'll be awesome. To Vicken, looking for a 1FZFE oil pump bushing. I think the only place to get those is Wits End. He sells the land tank ones. To get them from Toyota, they come with the engine block. So Wits End sells one that Land Tank makes that's separate, and I think that's the only place to get it. I've never seen them any place else. But yeah, we got tons of trucks coming through the shop. Hopefully we're getting the other half of the building towards the end of next month, which will be exciting because we're busting at the seams and need the extra space. So hopefully about the time I get back from Portugal, the other side will be empty and we can move over there and start cranking out more work. And then we'll have to start looking for a third tech, which will let me focus on more of the oddball fun stuff that I like to do. But yeah, I think that's all that's really going on. Just a bunch of just regular in and out work right now. Looks like we've got a couple of engine rebuilds coming in over the next few weeks, or I guess few months, which is weird because we almost never get those in, and we've got like several in at one time. So that'll be fun. It'll be a change of pace. But yeah, I've been kind of slowly working on the Shop 80, collecting parts for that, but not making any super progress. We've been so swamped that there hasn't been space for me to pull it in the shop and work on it. So that's going to be a long project, and it's going to be tight to get that thing ready to take up to Coal Mine Cruiser Classic in July. But hopefully we'll get it together in time and make it up there with it. If not, I guess I'll ride shotgun with my dad. But yeah, and hopefully you guys have questions, because I'm just about out of things to talk about. There was something else I was going to talk about on here, and I can't remember what it was. Just finished rebuilding 97 FJ80 motor. Started perfectly, but is low on power. Have you double checked your cam timing? If the cam timing isn't right, it can have weird power, low power, because you'll get intake and exhaust valve overlap. And what all did you do in rebuilding it? Like new Toyota short block, did the pistons get honed, stuff like that. And to Steve, I ordered a set of tires for my 4Runner eons ago from OK 4-Wheel Drive, but that's about the extent of my knowledge. I haven't really dealt with them other than the tire order years ago. I'm trying to think anything else that would make low power on 80 series. Yeah, valve timing, distributor timing. Possibly a massive vacuum leak, but that would be kind of hard to do on an 80 motor the way the gaskets go together. Yeah, I'm not sure. Unless something in the bottom end wasn't machined or put back together right. But I would think you would hear that or see it in oil pressure. Places to order an antenna mast, like a stock one. If you're looking for the stock antenna mast, I think your only bet is Toyota. I've never seen those in the aftermarket. Granted, I haven't really gone looking for them. But every time I've ever gotten one, they've been from Toyota. When you put it in 4 low, turn the center diff lock on, none of the lights come on. Most likely you've got a switch, like one of the sensor switches on the transfer case, like the one that tells the truck that it has gone into 4 low, may not be working anymore, or you may have wiring loose. That's the most common thing that we see. That's one of those problems where you've just got to kind of get the factory wiring diagram and just start working through it step by step and see where you're losing signal. They are not fun to diagnose because you just got to go pin by pin and follow the diagrams. Brake light flashing, need to tighten the handbrake. I'm not sure. Like, are those two separate issues? Or is your brake light flashing because the parking brake handle is bouncing? Or is it you've got a brake light flashing and you need to tighten the handbrake? I haven't gone through the tightening procedure on a 100 series yet. So I'm not sure. Like the 80 series, the cable adjusts under the boot inside the lever. But yeah, I've never messed with that. And a brake light on an 80 that stays lit. That could be your parking brake switch isn't disengaging, or you're low on brake fluid, or the alternator is going out. But if you're still driving it around, then probably not the alternator. And to chemo, I never use the square plug to top off 80 series knuckles. You pack them when you do the burfs, because there's no real way to tell if they're full or not. Yeah. We just pack them. I mean, if the knuckles aren't leaking, you shouldn't need to top them off. It should be, full. And if your knuckles are leaking, then you need to do the interaxle seal, and you're going to pack it and fill it up that way. And I don't have any locker actuator rebuild videos, but I actually need to do the ones on my truck. So I will likely do a video when I do mine, but I haven't done one yet. And yeah, to John, if your e-brake light is staying on, it's probably just a bad switch, but it's another one of those without going through it. It's, you'd have to check everything. Code 25 and 26 are on a 94 Land Cruiser. One is rich and one is lean, and I can never remember which way is which. And those suck to diagnose because you can't watch live data like you can on the later trucks. You've just got to follow the factory Toyota trouble tree and test everything, and it's a complete pain. Rear diff fluid recommendation. We just use part store 80/90 gear oil. I'm pretty sure Valvoline makes it or Ashland makes it. But we just use, generic 80/90 gear oil, unless it's somebody that's like going cross country and doing tons of highway miles. I don't really see the need for synthetic in there. So we just use, regular old gear oil. Any news on 94 80 series low and rough idle until it's driven 15 minutes? I would look at your coolant temp sensor. But that's another one. The 93 and 94 trucks just suck to diagnose because there's no live data. Like, you can't really watch all the sensors doing their thing and get an idea of what's going on. You've actually got to sit there and pin out, all the sensors to get what you're looking for. And luckily, we don't see a ton of drivability problems on the 93, 94s. The front diff you don't have to lock before a knuckle rebuild. The actuator runs on itself. It's just the rear one when you pull the rear flange, because the coupler rides on the axle shaft itself. And we use the Koyo wheel bearings. That stuff should all be the same as an 80 series. You should be able to get it from Toyota. I can't think of any reason why either of those would be different between a 450 and an 80 series. So you should be good at Toyota. Like, we do, a bunch of LX450, LX470, and we don't have an account with a Lexus dealer. We can get almost everything we need from Toyota, which is helpful because the nearest Lexus dealer is over an hour away from us. What diagnostic scanner do I use? I've got an older Snap-on Solus Ultra that I bought when I was doing all makes, all models. And that one is usually the first one I pull out just because it's faster. It's faster and easier to flip through menus than my other ones. We've also got a Toyota MasterTech. We've got a Toyota MasterTech that we use for like the 89 to like 2004 Land Cruisers. And then for the super new stuff, we use Toyota TechStream. But that one gets expensive because you got to subscribe to that. And as far as what wheel bearing grease do I use, usually just the Valvoline red wheel bearing grease. Every now and then we'll use the Mobil One synthetic, but it really doesn't seem to make a difference. Just the red generic stuff seems to hold up fine. I haven't broken down between parts and labor on oil pump cover, front main seal, but I think parts and labor, it's like $660, somewhere in that ballpark. And it depends on how the oil pump cover comes off, like if the screws strip or not. It can be anywhere from like 4.5 to 6 hours. Any thoughts on the best year for the 80 series from a reliability standpoint? 95 to 97. 95 to 97 just because they're OBD2 and it's way easier to pull live data from them. And to answer Vicken, 93, 94, you can kind of sort of hit and miss get live data out of MasterTech. But you can't get a ton. Like, you get the idle air control motor steps, you get coolant temp sensor. I think you get mass airflow, but you don't get like fuel trim. You get the weird early version of fuel trim, like VREF or whatever they call it. Um, so yeah, you kind of get live data, but it's really, really slow to update. Like you can flip the throttle back and forth, and it takes a couple of seconds for it to, catch and show that you've moved the throttle position sensor. Um, so yeah, it's not super easy. So I've never used D&J timing kits. We always use the Toyota stuff, but like that is probably okay. But how's the valve timing where the two gears come together, where the intake gear and the exhaust cam gear come together? I've seen those like get installed like a tooth or two off, and those will give you low power. When we're doing the oil pump cover and the front main seal, we generally do the belts while we're in there because the oil pump has slung oil on them and made them crappy. But that's pretty much all we do when we go in. Had to move top sprocket 2 teeth to line it up. Um, yeah, Vicken's question is about what I was going to ask. How much did you have to machine the head? I'm wondering if the timing chain distance is too short. So the double dots on the back side of the cam gears are lining up. That one, I'm not sure. And did Jim Frazier any pointers on fixing the trip meter in an 80 series? I've never taken one apart. Likely you're going to need a new cluster. I don't think that's something you can go in and play with. And to David, we work on some 70 series, but not many. Yeah, if your cam timing's all lined up, did you double check all the valve clearances when it went back together? I've seen those out of whack too, but usually that'll cause a pretty good misfire. And a high 2003 Land Cruiser temperature only works on high or cold. We luckily haven't had to get into any messing with the HVAC on the newer stuff. So I haven't done any diagnostics on that. I would guess you've got a blend door stuck, but that's just a guess. Did they set the valve clearances with the head bolted to the block? They shouldn't really change much, but they can, depending on how much they cut off the head. Like we always double check valve clearances when we're reassembling everything. Like after we've dropped and bolted the cams in, we go back and double check all the clearances. And usually they're good, but every now and then you come across one that's out. And I guess it's also possible if you honed it and put new rings in, that the rings haven't seated yet. Like they've got to wear in some before they really seal well. I wouldn't think that would make you noticeably down on power, but I guess it's a possibility. I guess I should ask, is it throwing any check engine lights? Um, that seems like a big gap for compression numbers on something that was just honed. And to Christian, the long life oil is probably fine. You know, as long as it meets like the specifications. And I'm not sure what specs they use in Sweden, but like here it's like ACEA, and it'll be like SN. As long as the oil meets the spec for the cruiser, you're fine. When diagnosing sounds, we use stethoscope, but I've got like an electric one. Um, I use chassis ears, which is a bunch of clamps that you clamp all over where you think the noise is coming from, and then it goes into headphones with a switcher. And then a lot of times we just use our ears. Um, yeah. Yeah, to Lisa's, I'm not sure. I would guess the rings may not be seating right, but I mean, it's another one of those without actually being able to see it and hear it. I don't know. Does it have transmission fluid in it? Like, is that all full? Because if you're low on trans fluid, it'll do that. But other than that, I mean, my gut says valve timing issue. But if you've already ruled that out, I'm not sure. What's going on, Devil Dog? And did you put standard size bearings back in there? Like, did you measure oil clearances on the bearings when those went in? Although I'd think if the bearings were too tight, it wouldn't rev well. Is the kickdown cable for the transmission adjusted properly? Because I wouldn't think it would go all the way up to $3,000 and shift hard. That sounds like the kickdown cable's not adjusted right. So yeah, I would check the kickdown cable. It's I think the lower cable on the throttle body, but I'm not quite sure. It's the one that runs back to the trans. I've never changed rings on a 1FZ. We haven't had reason to go in to do them yet. I've written a couple of rebuild quotes, but I've written them all using new Toyota short blocks. Because around here, we don't have a good block machine shop. And when I priced it all out, it wasn't that much more to get a new Toyota short block than to have it machined locally. No, it'll be the cable that comes from the side of the transmission pan, and it kind of comes up over the exhaust manifold and then into the throttle body. If that's not adjusted right, um, the transmission doesn't know it doesn't know how hard you're hitting the gas to know when to shift. So it can make the trans slip, and it can make hard shifts like you're talking about, because the trans kind of goes into default mode. And the Dickey new leak puddle, more water-like, landing between the back of the motor but in front of the oil pan. What series truck? If it's an 80 series, probably your pesky heater hose. And yeah, we don't get the diesels because of emissions. Emissions and probably safety, the highway safety standard, like the crush zones and stuff like that. Yeah, I've seen a kickdown cable cause loss of power, just because the trans doesn't know when to shift, and it'll let it slip. So I would check that, and that'd theoretically be an easy fix. Yeah, and to Dickey, if it's an LX450, is it coolant? Does it smell sweet? It's probably the pesky heater hose, because that's almost at the back of the block up on the driver's side. Kind of in line with like where your brakes are. If you're low on coolant or have a mysterious coolant leak, it's probably up there. If it's on the passenger side, it could also be the heater lines that run back to the rear heater. Those are really bad for rusting out. And yeah, you and me both. I'd really love a 70 series. I don't even care which one. I just want a 70 series. And you can get the old ones, but I don't think the 79 goes old enough to import those yet. I haven't seen a 1FZ bend a rod. If they all come up to the same measurement, and to be dead sure, you need to measure it with a straight edge and feeler gauges. I'd say you probably didn't bend a rod. My mom back in the day had an 80 series that popped the head gasket while she was parked and hydrolocked number 6. And, she came out and, tried to start it and just got the clunk clunk because the engine wouldn't turn over. She called my dad, and he just kept hitting the starter until it fired up, cleared out, and he drove it to the repair shop. And, that one lasted. It was fine. I haven't heard of them bending rods, but, anything's possible. We got a ton of squirrels out in the backyard. I just filled up all the bird feeders, and now the dogs want to go chase the squirrels away. Oh, I'm glad the videos helped. And David wants to know what the long-term prognosis of a leaking timing cover seal is on a 1FZ. I haven't seen them become a catastrophic leak. Although yours is only the third one that I've seen there, but all 3 have leaked in the exact same spot. And I think, looking at the diagram, there's an O-ring that's in between the block and the timing cover right there, and it's where the high-pressure oil goes from the timing cover into the block. So it'll probably continue to leak more. I don't know that it would become like a catastrophic, like dump all 8 quarts leak, because it's still got to go through the squeezed gap between the timing cover and the block. I've got to pull one apart in like a month or so I'll know for sure what it looks like when you pull it all apart. And to what's next on my truck, probably knuckles. Because if I do knuckles, I can get it inspected. Well, actually, if I do wheel bearings, I can get it inspected, but I'm going to do knuckles and wheel bearings all together. Yeah, and to Dickie, if it feels watery, probably coolant, and the pesky heater hose, if it's just dribbling, probably wouldn't make enough of a leak to know that you're low. But yeah, it's hard to see. But if it's dripping, if you get to shine the light up in there, it's kind of straight up above the starter. You might be able to see it drip. And to Vicken, what bolt or screws do I use on the oil pump cover? Most of the time, we just reuse the factory ones. We've gotten really, really good at getting them out without stripping them. And I keep a set of extra factory ones on hand in case we do strip them. I've also used the set from the guy that sells the pesky heater hoses. I think it's 1FCFEPHH.com. I've used his torque screws, and those work really well also. It probably would be the throttle cable if it's in the automatic transmission section. But yeah, I've always, we've always just called it the kickdown cable, but I guess technically for the transmission, it would be the throttle cable. And to Vicken, what usually goes wrong with the knuckles? Usually it's just the small inner axle seal starts to leak, which lets gear oil water down the grease. And when the grease gets watered down, it starts leaking past the wipers. That's the biggest thing. The knuckle bearings themselves can wear out. And the spindles where the Burfields ride, not spindles, the bushings in the spindle can wear out, but we don't see that all that often. And then Mike, yeah, the guy that sells the pesky heater hose also sells a Torx oil pump cover screw set. And it's like 1FCFEPHH.com or something like that is his website. And back to David's, we power washed everything around yours. And it took quite a bit of running to even get it to show a weep. So yours is definitely on the fresh side of leaking. Yeah, I mean, it'd probably be about the same level of leaking as like when the oil pump cover O-rings go bad. And to David, how often do we recommend repacking the wheel bearings? I've never tracked them by mileage. We just, we always jack up the trucks when they come in and check for play. And if it's just a little bit of play, we just adjust them. But, when we get in there, if the grease looks gross, all caked and dried out, then we'll recommend to the customer, hey, we should probably repack the wheel bearings instead of just adjusting them. And then, on higher mileage trucks, we'll just replace bearings rather than repack them. But, they seem to go a pretty good ways before you need to replace them. And I would bet you could get 50 to 60,000 miles between repacks, but I've never really actually paid that much attention to it. Awesome. Glad the little quick tips video helped. I'd meant to shoot that one and actually, video replacing the manifold, but I could not get a camera shot in there to record it. Yeah, a semi-deep. I've had semi-deep strip those out, but the spline drives seem to grab them. Wow, 12K seems short for a repack on wheel bearings. And to adjust them, you just take the hub or the drive flange off, bend the star washer tabs back. You take the outer nut off, take the star washer off, put a new star washer on. Well, actually, back up. We'll tighten, and this is not the factory service manual way of doing it, but I'll torque the inner adjuster nut to like 50-ish foot-pounds, spin the wheel both directions, to make sure everything's seated, and then loosen it up, run it back down finger tight, and then like an 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn tighter. Then new star washer and outer lock nut, and torque the outer lock nut on. That's the easiest way I've found to do it. That's the way I learned them. The factory manual has you doing a bunch of torque settings, which may also work well, but I've never gone through and done it that way. But in the 80 series knuckle video, in the third one, yeah, just adjusting preload. And I think in the third knuckle video, I go through, maybe second knuckle video, I go through doing the wheel bearing adjustment. And to T25, thanks for the thanks. Yeah, I kind of enjoy making the videos. Sometimes I get bummed down or bogged down editing them, but actually shooting them is most of the time pretty fun. And he does look like a thumb. You coming in, Philly? No? Okay. Two hands on the hub sack, it probably is about the same amount of oomph as I'm giving it with the 1/8 to 1/4 of an extra turn. And it's one of those, like, there's the factory manual way, and then there's like the way everybody learned to do it. Everybody seemed to learn, a different method for wheel bearing adjustment, and a lot of it just comes down to feel. And my dogs are driving me crazy with the going in and out. Come on. Can't you guys see him doing stuff? Yeah, that's like the guys, the guys that I learned from, had been doing it 20 or 30 years, and I learned it from them 20 years ago. They've got Land Cruiser get-togethers. I mean, you've got Rubathon and Cruise Moab, G Smitter down in Tennessee, Relic Run in North Carolina, Coal Mine Cruiser Classic up in PA. There's one in New Hampshire that I cannot think of. Fall Gathering up in New Hampshire, but I think there's another one. There's a bunch of them. I'm not sure how much 80 series he does, and I cannot think of the name of his shop, but if you look up Matzel, Matzell on I Hate Mud, he's got a general service shop in Richmond, but he does a ton of cruiser work. Like, he's got a ton of cruisers. So Rob's a good dude. He's the only one I know of down in Richmond, because I'm probably 2 hours out of Richmond. Yeah, in Michigan, I don't know any cruiser gatherings around Michigan. There's Black Hills in South Dakota. And oh yeah, Lone Star Jamboree in Texas, or Lone Star Roundup, whatever it is. I haven't made it to that one yet. How to get the clip off the cam sensor connector on the 80 or on the 100 series. It is not fun. We've got little bitty picks, and you can kind of wiggle everything and pop it apart with a pick. But half the time you end up stabbing your fingers. Although I actually like your way of doing it, removing the cam sensor and just leaving it snaked through the plastic cover. Because every now and then we do end up breaking that clip trying to get it off, and that would save that. And I remove the cam sensor anyway when I do the water pump, because I'm always sketched out that I'm going to nick the cam wires with the water pump while I'm wiggling it past. So I actually like your method. I may have to try that on the next one. And to T25, where are you at in Texas? I grew up outside of Dallas, but moved to Virginia like 25 years ago. And we use NGK or Denso plugs. Most often we just get them from Toyota, which is usually Denso. Toyota seems to be the cheapest place to buy them, as crazy as that sounds. Oh, Houston. Never lived in Houston. We went down there once to Astro World. But yeah, I grew up outside of Dallas and spent a little bit of time out in San Angelo. Iridiums are nice. I've got them in my 4Runner. I've got them in my Subaru. I had them in the Supra before I sold that. Have you seen the new Ruthenium? I saw a counter display for Ruthenium plugs. I have no idea what those are, but they're apparently the next big thing past Iridium. And I like that. I usually do have to wash my hands before I go to the bathroom. Yeah, it would have been early 80s when we went to Astro World way back in the day. We went to Six Flags in Dallas a ton, though. To art, yeah, there's probably not a ton of difference between the V6 and V8. Like even in the 100 series, like factory rear coils, They did a couple of different versions. Um, you probably wouldn't notice a difference in them. And to Nigel, I haven't tried ceramic pads yet. And to David, I have not talked to the guy with the wrecked 40th. He's been out of town, but I did finish up his Subaru last week, so he will be coming by to grab that. So when he comes by to pick up the Subaru, I'll ask him about the flares. Because I noticed yours is missing a flare. It shouldn't matter between park and neutral for setting timing. We usually do it in park, and make sure that you jump the pins in the diagnostic box because that locks the timing and lets you adjust it. And to KMC Duramax, are you saying your coolant reservoir itself leaks, or the truck is leaking and you can't find the leak? Because it could be the heater lines, the pesky heater hose, or you could have a head gasket leak and it's eating the coolant. And awesome, yeah, Nigel, keep me posted. I'm always up for new brake tech. I don't think the transmission is the same between an LX450 and an LX470. I'm almost positive that they're not, but I don't know that absolutely for sure. The transfer cases are the same, but I don't think the transmission is. Um, and to Robert, there likely is a special tool for the seal on the 100 series to make sure it seats 5 millimeters in. I've never seen one. Like you'd have to get it from Toyota. We've got a set of they're just random metric tubes for driving seals and races and bushings and stuff. So we just use one of those to knock it in. Um, Spartan lockers, Lockrights, Aussies, they work. Um, they can be sketchy on the road because they'll lock and unlock randomly. And they can be sketchy in snow and ice. As they lock and unlock, it can make the truck shimmy. It's one of those you just have to get used to it. And yeah, I've driven V8 4Runners. It is the same engine as the 100 series. And they're nice. Um, to Vickens, I'm not sure. I would think if it had a bad head gasket leak, the misfire would make the idle go down. Um, but yeah, trying to think. Unless it's seeing the misfire and try to compensate and overcompensating, but that's a weird one. The 93 and 94 can be like really screwy with the way they read things. But I'm trying to think how a misfire would make the idle high. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Trying to think, because the miss when you first start it is probably the coolant that's leaked into the cylinder burning out. And then, once you've burned out the coolant, you're pushing exhaust gases. You're pushing the exhaust gas into the coolant system because now the cylinder pressure is higher than the cooling system being higher when the engine's off. But I don't know how that would make a high idle. And yes, Sam is right. Hit that like button. I like seeing the like button go up. Yeah, if you've got a very, very, very small head gasket leak, it may start to seal as everything expands with heat and seals up. More likely is you're not leaking coolant into the cylinder anymore once it's up and burning or up and running, but that you're blowing exhaust gas the other way so it stops misfiring. I don't know that I'm going to have an answer to a question about 24-volt power in a 12-volt vehicle, but maybe. Reman airflow meters are almost always a bad idea. I don't know what they do to them, but I've never seen one work right. And the question about chassis grounding, I am probably not going to have a good answer to that. I've never messed with 24-volt vehicles. And to the intake hose on an 80 series, I've seen people running aftermarket ones, but I haven't seen I don't know where they got them. It's just trucks have come through that have already had them on there. But it looks like there at least is an aftermarket source, and the ones we've seen looked pretty good. I'm not sure about grounding 24-volt appliances to a 12-volt system. And yes, the FLIR thermal gun is awesome for things like that. You can see leaking cylinder. I used one on David's brakes today, trying to figure out if he had a sticky caliper. We went out and did a bunch of panic stops, and then came back to the shop and hit it with a thermal imaging camera to see what the brake rotors look like. What's the lowest mile 80 series I've seen in the shop lately? We had one come through probably in the fall that I think had 74,000 on it. That's the lowest. And I think the highest mileage one lately is mine at 350. Have you ever felt a harmonic vibration in the pedal on a 100 series? And if you put your hand on the transfer case lever, you can feel it. Does it change with throttle? Is it only there at idle? Does it go away when you hit the gas? Short answer is no, I haven't run across that. But yeah, I'll think on that one. I'm not sure. And adding a fridge in the back, where should you tap power? Generally, we'll run either all the way to the battery, and add a fuse, tap on the battery, or better bet it'd be to install like an aftermarket fuse block. And then you can tap your fridge, your lights, your inverter, your laptop, whatever else into one centralized fuse block. And then you don't have to run all your wires up to the battery. You just run one heavier cable to the fuse block and then branch out from there. What's the lowest miles that I've seen a bad head gasket on a 1FZ? Probably 120. Although most of them we see bad head gaskets on are between like 180 and 270. But I think I've seen one that was around 120. And thank you, T25, for the ground question. Or for the ground answer. Yeah, I am not up on my 12 and 24 volt stuff. Oh, 12 volt, but not 24 volt. Oh, and I don't know if it's happening where you guys live, but allergies are coming out strong here in Virginia. I'll have to get some Benadryl when I jump off of here. We generally use quality aftermarket burfs because they're like a half to third the price of an OEM one. And we like the Terrain Tamer Burfields are super high quality. We've never seen an issue out of them. So we generally rate those because they're like $225 versus, I want to say last time I priced a factory Burfield, it was almost $600. I didn't even think about that. The 5 volt reference signal uses the same ground as the 12 volts. That makes sense. Yeah, we raked all the leaves off the back deck like 2 weekends ago, and it about killed me. We had the doors at the shop open today, and I'm all stuffed up. This is not the season to decide to try and start trail running. I think my nose runs more than I do. Well, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to jump off of here for the evening and get the dogs dinner and get started on our dinner. But thanks to everybody that tuned in. These chats are always fun. But yeah, thanks for everybody that tuned in. If you haven't, please subscribe below. And if you really dig the chats and the videos, check out our Patreon link down in the description below. We always appreciate the support. But yeah, really appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys next week. Thanks.